My mother rolled her eyes the moment I stepped into that Massachusetts courtroom. Not subtle, the kind that says loud and clear, "Here we go again." Like I'm some disruption to her. Perfectly polished victim narrative. But then Judge Brennan paused mid-page, his gaze snapping to my face, and I saw recognition hit like a brick wall. "Hold on," he muttered, setting down his pen. "These accusations are against you. You're the one on trial." My parents sat frozen, blinking in confusion. They had no idea who I'd become. And honestly, that made what followed even sweeter. Because I'm not just their forgotten daughter. I'm the lead prosecutor who's spent the past decade locking up manipulators just like them. Let's rewind. 32 years. I was 3 months old when my mother, Diane, decided parenting didn't suit her aesthetic. She was only 18, fresh out of high school in Newton, Massachusetts. My father, Scott, was a rising hockey star for the Boston Bruins, chasing glory under the bright lights of TD Garden. A crying baby didn't fit their picture-perfect world. So they did what selfish people do. They left me with my grandparents in Brooklyn one cold October morning and vanished. My first clear memory is standing on a wooden stool in Grandma Helen's kitchen, maybe 4 years old, pouring too many chocolate chips into cookie dough. She never scolded me, never sighed. She'd just laugh and say, "The best cookies have extra love and extra chocolate." Grandpa William would stride in still, wearing his Supreme Court robes, lift me up with flour in my hair, and ask about my day like it mattered more than any case he'd heard. I'd tell him about the ants I found outside, and he'd listen as if I were presenting to the state's highest court. They never said a bad word about my parents. Not once. When I asked why Mommy and Daddy didn't live with us, Grandma would smile gently and say they were busy with important things. I believed that for a while, because children believe kind people. But I wasn't blind. I saw other parents at soccer games at Brooklyn Field while mine never came. Heard friends talk about Thanksgiving dinners with loud families, while my holidays were quiet and early. Diane and Scott's visits were clockwork. Christmas, maybe my birthday if it fit their schedule. Diane would glide in, wearing designer clothes from Newbury Street, air kiss my cheek, and scroll through her phone the entire time. Meanwhile, Scott sat outside in the car, honking when he got bored. The rare times Grandpa dragged him in, the tension was palpable. Grandpa couldn't stand him, and didn't try to hide it. Here's what no one knew. Grandpa sent Diane $3,000 every single month from the day I was born for 20 years. Over $800,000. She pocketed every cent, gave nothing back. No visits, no calls, no gifts, only excuses and more requests when Scott's endless ventures failed. The sports bar in Quincy that tanked in a year, the coaching gig with 0 clients, the memorabilia shop that went bankrupt in 2. When Grandma Helen died of a stroke over Thanksgiving weekend, when I was 18, my world cracked open. She collapsed in her garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring. I drove home from BU that night, 6 hours of tears. Found Grandpa sitting in the dark garden, holding those bulbs in his hands. We sat there till dawn. Diane and Scott came to the funeral, stayed for the service, and left before dessert. That's when I stopped defending them. When I realized some people are built selfish and blood isn't an obligation. After Grandma died, something changed between Grandpa and me. We became a team. Those Sunday dinners were sacred. Sometimes his legendary New England pot roast, sometimes my attempts at Grandma's recipes written in her looping cursive on yellowed cards. Sometimes just pizza straight from the Bucks, watching old movies. But the real lesson wasn't in the food, it was in
what he taught me about law, about
justice, about wielding power. I graduated at the top of my class from Boston University Law School. Grandpa sat in the front row, filming every second with his old camcorder. My parents mailed a card, 2 sentences.
good job. Proud of you.
I'd stopped expecting more years ago, landing a prosecutor's position right out of law school with the Massachusetts District Attorney's Office was partly Grandpa's doing.
He
Made calls, vouched for my work ethic, promised I wouldn't waste the chance. He was right. I threw myself into it completely, staying late, showing up early, volunteering for the complicated cases no one else wanted. Financial crimes, political scandals, white-collar fraud, weeks buried in documents in windowless rooms. By 30, I was taking on high-profile cases that landed front page in the Boston Globe. My personal life didn't exist. 70-hour weeks were normal. I lived on Dunkin', coffee, takeout, and the satisfaction of watching guilty people finally face consequences. No dating, no happy hours, no social anything, just work and Sunday dinners with Grandpa. Those nights were non-negotiable. No matter how drained I was, I showed up.
He did.
Too, even in his 80s, moving slower but never missing a meal. Diane called once during that
Period.
I was 28, hadn't heard from her in 3
years.
She wanted help with one of Scott's legal disasters, some business mess in Revere. I told her I was a criminal prosecutor, not a civil attorney, and even if I weren't, I wouldn't lift a finger for Scott. She called me ungrateful. I hung up.
When
Grandpa passed away at 87, quietly in his sleep in that big Brookline house, the old ache returned. But I wasn't an 18-year-old girl anymore. I was 32, and I'd become exactly what he raised me to be. The will was read a week later at a firm on State Street. I expected a few keepsakes, his watch, some books, a few mementos. Instead, he left me everything. The Brooklyn house worth $1 million by itself, investments, savings, insurance, $3 million total. Everything he built over 4 decades on the Massachusetts Supreme Court bench. He left it all to me, with one sealed letter.
My dearest Haley, it began.
Asterisk, you earned this by showing up, by loving me and your grandmother when others couldn't be bothered. Asterisk, I cried reading it. Not from grief, validation. Then the attorney handed me another envelope, bank records, emails, and letters proving Grandpa had sent Diane $3,000 every month for 20 years, over $800,000 in total. Messages of her begging for more, promising visits she never made. Letters from Scott asking for cash for his doomed ventures. Your grandfather assumed they might contest this, the lawyer said.
He
wanted you armed with proof. 30 days later, my attorney, Thomas, called. Diane and Scott had filed a lawsuit, claiming undue influence, saying Grandpa was senile, that I'd manipulated him for money. I laughed out loud. The irony was delicious.
They still pictured me as
that helpless baby, easy to push around. They had no idea I'd spent 10 years taking down people just like them. Which brings us back to that courtroom. Judge Marcus Brennan had clerked for Grandpa 23 years earlier before taking the bench.
He
knew exactly who I was. Your Honor, he said, I should disclose that I had a professional relationship with Judge Parker.
If
either party objects to my hearing this case, speak
now.
My mother's lawyer, Richard Palmer, whispered frantically with them. Finally, he rose.
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Big mistake. Palmer's opening statement was pure fiction dressed as pity. He painted Diane as a heartbroken daughter, torn from her loving father by manipulative parents who poisoned their bond. Judge Parker was deep in grief after losing his wife of 60 years. Palmer argued, voice heavy with staged emotion.
He was
Vulnerable, and the defendant exploited that. This does not reflect his true intentions. Then Thomas stood for our side. No theatrics. Your Honor, this case is straightforward.
Judge.
Parker was brilliant, deliberate, and clear-minded. He left his estate to the one person who earned it. Through 3 decades of love and loyalty.
The
records show the plaintiffs received over $800,000. While barely showing up, Palmer called Diane first. She swore in, wearing a plain black dress, minimal makeup, playing the mourning daughter perfectly. He meant everything to me, she said, dabbing fake tears with a tissue she clearly brought for the act. When he offered to watch Haley while Scott and I got settled, I thought it was temporary, but they
kept her.
Made me feel guilty every time I couldn't visit. They turned my own daughter against me. Thomas rose for cross-examination.
Calm. Precise.
Lethal. Mrs. Morrison, you willingly left Haley with your parents when she was 3 months old. Yes, but I was young, overwhelmed. According to your father's notes, you visited 4 times that first year. Christmas, Easter, her birthday, and 1 Saturday in July. Correct? Yes. Diane's face reddened. I had expenses. I was supporting Scott's career. Thomas held up the bank records.
Your
father sent you $3,000 a month for over 20 years. That's more than $800,000, Mrs. Morrison. Meanwhile, you visited him 8 times in the last 10 years of his life, less than once a
year.
And you call that being a devoted daughter? When was the last time you saw him alive? Silence. His 84th birthday, 3 years before he passed. I was there about 90 minutes. Left before cake, Thomas said. You didn't see him again until the funeral? That's correct. He let it hang in the air. One final question. Isn't it true you stopped visiting once? He refused extra money beyond your monthly allowance? That when he retired and said payments would continue, but the extras would end. You never came back for 3 years. Scott's testimony was worse. He couldn't name a single school event he attended. Thomas projected photos. Haley's high school graduation. There's Judge Parker. Front row. There's Helen Parker.
Where
are you, Mr. Morrison? I might have had something. You didn't come. Thomas cut in. You missed her college graduation, law school graduation, every milestone. And now you want half the estate built by the man who actually showed up. Palmer pivoted to incompetence, calling a psychiatrist who had never met my grandfather. Dr. Hughes claimed depression based on nothing.
Thomas
ripped him apart. So, you diagnosed a man you never met with an illness absent from his medical records and used that to claim he wasn't competent. Our witnesses were bulletproof.
Judge
Andrew Mitchell testified. Grandpa stayed sharp until the end. Margaret Chen, his estate lawyer, confirmed he was thorough and deliberate planning for this exact lawsuit. Then I took the stand. Thomas guided me through 32 years, every missed birthday, every broken promise, every unanswered call. My tone steady, measured, precise. Palmer tried to shake
me.
Isn't it true you manipulated him? I leaned forward. Mr. Palmer, I spent decades loving my grandfather. If money was my goal, I wasted my time. I could have been building my own fortune instead of spending Sundays with an old man.
But
I chose him because he was worth more than anything your clients ever valued. Judge Brennan's ruling was immediate. The court finds Judge Parker's will valid and reflective of his true intent. No undue influence. No incompetence. Evidence shows a pattern of neglect by the plaintiffs and loyalty by the defendant. The will stands. Attorney. Fees awarded to the defense.
Case dismissed.
The gavel hit like thunder. As we left, Diane approached, crying, "Haley, please, can we talk?" I looked straight at her. "There's nothing to discuss, Diane. I'm your mother."
No.
"You're the woman who gave birth to
Me.
my mother was Helen Parker. You had 32 years to be part of my life. You chose not to. Don't reach out again. We're finished." I walked out without looking back.
4.
The first time in my life, I felt truly
Free.
Grandpa had given me one last gift, proof that I wasn't wrong.
That.
Love outweighs blood. That presence matters more than performance. 3 years later, I became a judge at 33, one of the youngest in Massachusetts history. I wore Grandpa's robe my first day. At 38, I was appointed to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, taking his old seat. I wrote landmark opinions that reshaped family
Law.
Family isn't a biological accident. I wrote, it's a daily choice. Actions matter. Presence matters.
Consistency
Matters. Blood guarantees nothing. Diane died 5 years after the trial. Heart failure. Scott called, asked me to
come.
I declined. She hadn't been part of my life, and death didn't change that. Scott passed 2 years later. I felt nothing. 20 years after Grandpa's passing, they renamed the courthouse the William Parker Justice Center. At the ceremony, I stood before his portrait. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "Everything you dreamed." At 60, after 3 decades on the bench, I retired. My last visit was to their graves at Mount Auburn Cemetery. I planted fresh tulip bulbs around their headstones. "Thank you for choosing me," I said, "for loving me, for shaping who I became. Because here's the truth. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. Family is the ones who show up day after day for a lifetime. Blood makes connection, but only love builds family." That's not just my story. That's justice. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever had to choose between toxic relatives and those who truly showed up, leave a comment below sharing your story.
Hit subscribe
For more about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. And remember, loyalty is earned, not owed. Thanks for watching.